Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to my last lecture for the semester. I'm just going to introduce a short concept here which I think can be useful as you move forward and as you integrate AI tools into your learning process. And this concept I'm calling AI sophistry. I'll explain why in a moment. To introduce the concept, I'm going to try some very bad acting. I hope you forgive me. I'm going to try to play the character of an Australian used car salesman. Okay, so we walk into the car lot, we're looking to buy a car. And this character, I'll call myself Mike, walks up to you and says, "Oh, hello there, my friend. Come over here, let me show you something really, really special." Now, I know what you're thinking. This just looks like a used car. But my friend, this is not just any used car. This is a collector's item in the making. Look at the paint. Okay, it's got a few character marks, but it tells a story, doesn't it? This car has been loved. And the engine, it purrs. It makes a little more noise than a new car, but that's the sound of power, a vehicle that really wants to be driven. You won't find this sort of authentic feel in those soulless new cars. This car right here, this car is an investment. It's a piece of history just waiting for the right owner. And I think someone like you, someone who really appreciates quality. So the price, well, let's just say this is really an opportunity. For someone who understands value, this is basically a steal. I've got 3 other people calling me about it, but I've got a really good feeling about you. You look like a person who knows something good, who knows it when they see it. You understand beauty. You understand the dream. Look, okay, so what I've done with this character, Mike, is I've basically attempted to sell you a bad car. I got this image from Suzuki or a car company that was warning people about buying bad cars. But I was using a technique called sophistry in order to try to sell you a bad car. But it only works if you don't know anything about cars. So the notion of sophistry, or the clever use of false arguments with the intention of deceiving, is something that was a popular subject in ancient Greek philosophy. Particularly, it was described by Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. And we see this painting here. This is the School of Athens by Raphael, and it's meant to represent, I think here in the middle we have, I think it's like Plato and Aristotle or something like that. Okay, you can Wikipedia it, but this is, this image here is to represent classical Greek philosophy. But what Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle described was the departure from the pursuit of truth and knowledge and the move towards just persuasion and financial gain. That's what they were concerned about with this notion of sophistry. Without specific knowledge in a particular subject, it can be very easy for someone to use language in a manipulative way to persuade you of something that is not true and that is not in your best interest, just like me trying to sell you the bad car. In ancient Greek philosophy, we find lots of ways to try to avoid or combat sophistry, not through necessarily providing a better counter-argument, because you might not know anything about the subject, but for building an intellectual framework for yourself in order to determine virtue, truth, and knowledge. So that when you encounter very persuasive arguments, you have the ability to evaluate them according to your own internal framework and to avoid being drawn into somebody else's rhetorical argument. For the ancient Greek philosopher Socrates, one strategy was using questioning and interrogation, looking for contradictions, being intellectually humble. And for Plato, it involved dialectical reasoning and a theory of forms. And for Aristotle, it involved using formal systems of logic, such as inference, reasoning, and the syllogism. A syllogism it's a type of reasoning where you have 2 statements, and you use both of these statements to derive a conclusion that is not in either statement. So we could say, all animals have 4 legs, dogs are animals, therefore dogs have 4 legs. That will be a syllogism. Okay, so why is the notion of sophistry relevant for AI? Well, as AI tools are rapidly developing. Of course, as we saw in the question of AI and alignment, we can't predict exactly what their effects on society will be. There's plenty of studies coming out now, I've got a few here on the screen, showing that, as we use these tools, what is their effect on our ability to learn and to sort of absorb information. It's quite a different educational tool. To predict the consequences of this is a little difficult, but I think what we can do, much like the kind of ancient Greek critique of sophistry, is we can ask certain questions of ourselves that can hopefully put us in a good position to engage with AI tools in a way that will hopefully protect us from certain traps in thinking. So one question would be, how do we learn when we always have access to the answers? In a simple sense, a calculator is not useful if you don't understand basic arithmetic. If we take this into another domain, if a young computer programmer is struggling with a complex bug, traditionally they would debug, research, and experiment and slowly build an intuitive understanding of the system. But with an AI assistant, we can simply copy and paste the code in and say, fix this bug in my Python code, and the AI will provide a solution. While this can be very inefficient, we know that some learning opportunity of problem solving and deep analysis is lost. And so, how do we deal with that type of trade-off? We could say the same of cars. A car that can drive itself is great, but we will end up with a larger gap between our relationship to fixing a car and driving a car and something that we can only really get inside of and do whatever it sort of is programmed to do. If we take this a step further, one of the profound questions that AI automation poses to us is, what knowledge do we need? Obviously, I'm making a joke here on the screen. If I don't know anything about a subject, how do I know if I'm getting good information from the AI on that subject? But to be honest, if you don't know anything about a subject, how do you know that your teacher is giving you good information? How do you know that this lecture is any good if you don't know anything about AI? The answer, to be perfectly honest, is that you don't. And it's only through developing your own base of knowledge and experience that you can start to make your own evaluations, both evaluations of the quality of my lectures, as well as evaluations about the quality of an output that an AI might give you. Eventually, it will be relative to your own experience. So, if we go a step deeper, how do we know what questions we should ask an AI? When do we have an idea that prompts a question? In my experience, when I'm reading a book, often I get ideas that are not necessarily in the book. It's through reading the book that I start thinking about other things, and all of a sudden I'll be inspired to ask a new question or start a new project. And this raises another tricky question. If I didn't read that book, and if I asked AI, please give me a summary of this book, I wouldn't have had the experience physically and mentally that I had when reading it, and maybe I wouldn't have thought the thoughts that I thought when I was reading the book. So again, we get into a point where I think we will need to be very responsible in how we use these tools, because ultimately our ability to ask questions and to think thoughts is really directly correlated to our ability to use AI tools usefully. So a classic adage in computer science is garbage in, garbage out. The quality of the output from any system is very heavily dependent on the quality of the input. So in the case of AI, a chatbot is designed to deliver a useful output relative to your prompt. If you don't have any knowledge about what you're prompting about, you don't necessarily have the ability to challenge the AI's initial response, which might lead you into a feedback loop of confirmation bias, where the answers sound good even though they might not be, where you follow answers that might confirm or start to exaggerate your interpretation or your own bias, leading to thoughts and ideas that might just not be that useful for you and might be increasingly esoteric or divorced from reality. These to me are some of the challenges that you'll be facing. So thinking about this more, we find ourselves at kind of a lot of basic questions in philosophy, or in this case, in epistemology. What is it to know something? What is a justified true belief? AI chatbots don't have consciousness or subjective experience as far as we're aware. It's more accurate to say that they statistically predict words. And this forces us to question whether generating an accurate text is actually the same thing as knowledge. So how do we establish the truth of an AI-generated statement? Is it true because the AI says it's true, or is it only true if it corresponds to reality? And because the AI does not live in the reality we live in, it only knows the patterns that it can see in data. It's only us at the moment who can make this correspondence to lived reality. Much of human knowledge comes from direct experience, intuition, and embodied practice, and AI at the moment lacks this. Knowledge is often constructed and validated through social processes, through debate, through collaborative inquiry, and if AI bypasses this, we can end up with an illusion that knowledge is singular and authoritative if it comes from this system. So I'm going to finish this lecture with these 3 questions. And you can see that they're not questions that can really be easily answered. They're questions that are intended to guide you. First question, how do we know how to ask a question? Second question, how do we know if the question is a good question? Third question, how do we know? What's the basis of our knowledge? These questions are intended to help you reposition your relationship with AI, and perhaps just start with thinking of AI as a thinking partner rather than an answering machine. If AI generates, different answers to the same question, this is much like, talking to a friend, talking to somebody who knows a lot of things. We might never have single, truthful, final answers to questions, but we can certainly use these tools to help deepen our own process of thought and our own internal knowledge frameworks. And I think keeping this risk of AI sophistry or of being easily misled as something in the back of your mind, it should be a good guide for how you can use AI as a thinking partner that can help in your own personal and intellectual development as you move forward. Okay, bye-bye.